cut the neck, and he said that he was very careful. They told me, they were very clear, you may not come out of this alive. That when you cut the neck, it's very close to the vocal cords. And I said, oh, well, that's a plus.
Imagine a rock star who never smashed a guitar, never partied until dawn, and never chased fame for the sake of headlines. A man whose voice could hush a stadium, who stood shoulder to shoulder with legends like Freddie Mercury and Jimmy Page, yet always chose the quiet path. This is the story of Paul Rodgers, a man whose life is darker, deeper, and more inspiring than most realize. It's not a tale of wild scandals or tragic falls, but of a voice that burned like a steady flame through decades of chaos, illness, and change, a voice that even at 73 refuses to fade. Let's dive into the journey of Paul Rodgers, a man who didn't just sing rock anthems. He lived a life that became one. Paul Rodgers was born on December 17, 1949, in Middlesbrough, a gritty town in England, where factories' puff smoke and ship horns echoed through the streets. His dad was a painter, working long hours on construction sites, while his mom stayed home, raising Paul and his two brothers in a small, modest house. They weren't rich, and they didn't have any connection to music or fame. Life was simple. Kids played soccer in the streets, and evenings were spent gathered around an old radio. For young Paul, that radio was magic. One day, when he was just 10, he heard Ray Charles' voice pour out of it. The way Ray sang, full of heart and pain, stopped Paul in his tracks. From then on, he'd sneak away every night to listen to soul and blues records. Otis Redding, Sam Cooke, Muddy Waters. He'd mimic their voices, teaching himself to sing with feeling, even though no one in his family was musical. His parents didn't push him toward music, but they didn't stop him either. They let him practice in the backyard shed, where he'd belt out notes to the walls. By 14, Paul was playing bass and singing in a school band called the Roadrunners. They'd perform at small pubs and school dances, earning just a few calçots, ins but feeling like kings. While his friends dreamed of factory jobs or college, Paul had a quiet dream. Music could be his life. At 18, he packed his bags, left Middlesbrough, and moved to London with no money, no plan, just a voice and a spark of hope. London in the late 1960s was a tough place for dreamers. The city was bursting with bands, all fighting to be heard in smoky pubs and tiny clubs. It was a world where you either stood out or disappeared. Paul's voice, warm, soulful, raw, made people stop and listen. He joined a band called Brown Sugar, but it didn't go anywhere. Then one night at a gig in Finsbury Park, a young guitarist named Paul Kossoff heard him sing an American blues song. It was like Paul was born to sing it, even though he was just a kid from a small English town. They clicked instantly. Soon they teamed up with drummer Simon Kirke and a 15-year-old bassist named Andy Fraser to form a new band called Free. The name came from Paul himself, a promise to make music their way, free from the pop trends of the day. In 1968, when Free played their first show, the band was barely 18 years old on average. They signed with Island Records and released their first album, Tons of Sobs, in 1969. It didn't sell much, but critics noticed Paul's voice, wild yet full of heart like nothing else out there. Then came 1970, and their third album, Fire and Water, changed everything. The song All Right Now, written by Paul and Andy in just 10 minutes after a bad gig, became a global hit. It climbed the charts in the UK and US, played over 1 million times on American radio. Free went from nobodies to stars in one summer. They toured the world, but trouble was brewing. Paul Kossoff battled addiction, and Andy clashed with Paul over the band's direction. By 1971, Free broke up, only to reunite briefly before splitting for good in 1970. Paul was just 23, but his voice, hey, had already carved his name into rock history. After Free, Paul didn't rush back to the stage. He took time to think, to write, to grow. In 1973, he got a call from Mick Ralphs, a guitarist from Mott the Hoople. Together, they formed Bad Company, a band that would define 1970s rock. Signed to Led Zeppelin's Swan Song Records, with Jimmy Page and manager Peter Grant backing them, Bad Company was a powerhouse from the start. Their first album in 1974 went platinum, hitting #1 in the U.S. Songs like Can't Get Enough, Feel Like Making Love, and Shooting Star weren't just hits. They were stories Paul told through his voice, raw and real. He didn't sing to show off. He sang like he was sharing a secret. Bad Company released 6 albums from 1974 to 1982, playing hundreds of shows worldwide. Paul was their heart, their leader, but the endless touring wore him down. By the early 1980s, as music shifted to synths and new wave, Paul made a choice most rock stars wouldn't. He stepped away. Not because of drama or drugs, but to focus on his family. He wanted a quieter life, a chance to breathe. In 1984, Paul returned with a new project called The Firm, teaming up with Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. They made 2 albums with hits like Radioactive, but the band didn't last long. It was a chance for Paul to try something new, to stretch his voice in different ways. Then in 1983, he did something bold. He released a solo album called Cut Loose. He wrote it, sang it, played most of the instruments, and produced it himself. It wasn't a big hit, but it was honest. A record made for him, not the charts. Songs like Live in Peace showed his heart, simple and true. In 1993, he released Muddy Water Blues, a tribute to his hero Muddy Waters. He brought in guitar legends like Brian May, Jeff Beck, and David Gilmour, blending rock and blues in a way that felt both old and new. The album was nominated for a Grammy, proving Paula L wasn't just a rock star. He was an artist who could honor the roots of his music. Paul's personal life was as steady as his voice. Unlike many rockers, he stayed out of the tabloids. He married Michiko Shimizu in the 1970s, and they had 2 kids, Steve and a daughter. He was a devoted dad, even stepping away from music at Bad Company's peak to be with his family. After his marriage ended, he stayed single until 2007, when he married Cynthia Caroluck, a former Miss Canada. They live in a quiet seaside home in British Columbia, surrounded by nature. Paul does yoga, hikes, and gardens, habits that keep him grounded. But life wasn't always calm. In 2016, a major stroke stole his ability to speak. Then in 2019, another stroke hit, along with 11 mini-strokes. Doctors warned he might never sing again. After a 6.5-hour brain surgery, Paul fought back with his wife's support and his own quiet strength. He not only spoke again, but returned to the studio, releasing Midnight Rose in 2023, his first album of new songs in nearly 25 years. The album's bluesy, soulful sound was like a letter to the world. Paul Rodgers was still here. His voice has inspired countless singers. Freddie Mercury called him England's best rock singer. Brian May said Paul's voice made him stop and listen. Stars like Chris Cornell and Joe Bonamassa looked to him as a guide for singing with feeling, not just power. Paul helped shape blues rock, blending American soul with British grit. With Free, he made raw, emotional music. With Bad Company, he built arena-ready anthems. With Queen, he stepped into Freddie Mercury's shoes, not to replace him, but to honor him as himself. He's also given back quietly, supporting animal welfare, health causes, and stroke recovery programs, never seeking attention for it. Today, at 73, Paul lives a peaceful life in Canada. He still writes music every day, not for fame, but because it's who he is. In 2024, he released a music video for Photo Shooter from Midnight Rose, showing his voice still carries the same heart. He's working on a new project called Can't Get Enough, a tribute to Bad Company, set for release in fall 2025. It's not about nostalgia, it's about passing the torch to new artists. On social media, he shares small moments with fans, staying true to himself without chasing trends. Paul doesn't need to prove anything anymore. He's sung his truth for over 50 years, from a boy in Middlesbrough to a legend who's faced strokes, loss, and change, yet never lost his voice. What makes Paul Rodgers' story so special? It's not the fame or the hits. It's the way he's lived. Quietly, honestly, with a voice that feels like it's speaking just to you. He's proof that you don't need to be the loudest to be heard. You just need to be real. So, what inspires you most about Paul Rodgers? His incredible voice, his calm strength, or his refusal to give up? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe with the notification bell on so you don't miss more stories about artists who live their truth. Paul Rodgers' voice is still burning bright. Let's keep telling the stories that matter.